Hello and welcome to Eternal in 5. I'm aReNGee, and today we're going to be talking about Decimate, which is the third of the five new mechanics coming to Eternal card game in the Flame of Zolta. Decimate is a additional cost mechanic, sort of similar to Annihilate, in which when you play a card, you're given the option to permanently expend one maximum power in order to gain an additional effect. This doesn't mess with your influence at all, but it's sort of an anti-power drop in that you go down from 5 power to 4. It's more powerful than most other additional cost effects because you're always going to have access to it. Whenever you can play a Decimate card, even something one cost like Draw Strength here, you're always going to have the option to Decimate it. So, unlike Amplify, in which you need a whole bunch of extra power in order to get those additional effects, Decimate is always something that you can activate. And hey, if there's never another turn, it didn't really cost you anything. So that certainly makes Decimate cards a lot more powerful because they're always either their half or full strength versions, depending on how much you're willing to commit to it. And another interesting thing as we look at Draw Strength here is that they don't always do the same thing. With Amplify, you usually got more of the same. Bounce 1 unit becomes bounce 2 units, deal 3 damage to one target becomes deal 6 damage to one target, whereas with Decimate, it can do something totally different. Draw Strength is a generic pump spell, give one of your units +1/+1 this turn for each enemy unit. With Decimate, well, it Warcries the top 3 cards of your top 3 units of your deck, which sort of builds into later in the game. This card, obviously not a constructed card for draft, but it is very interesting that it showcases that you can do 2 things for 1 card, which can often be a lot more powerful than just doing a stronger version of one thing. An example of doing 2 things on 1 card is with the previous spoiler Reconnaissance, where it gives one of your units +2 attack and unblockable. And when you Decimate, it that unit can pilfer the top card of the opponent's deck. Doesn't really make a ton of sense when you're trying to Reconnaissance or when you're giving a unit unblockable, you definitely want to kill the opponent, and needing to hit the opponent to draw a card is not really where you want to be. But, another draft example of doing 2 different things on a single card. The real meat of the cycle is the Cast into Shadow, which on its base kills an enemy unit or curse with a single faction. But if you Decimate it, it kills an additional enemy unit or curse with that same faction. So on its base, it's a 3-cost Annihilate. If you Decimate it, it is 2 Annihilates for 1 card, which instant card advantage, and very, very powerful against certain deck archetypes. Mono Time especially is going to get blown out by this. This is a card I expect to see a ton of going forward. Perhaps not in Ranked, but certainly in the Expedition format, where most of the good removal is leaving. And there's a lot more focus on mono-faction decks, given that the power base just isn't there. So a big boost to Argenport decks going forward. Next up we have Soul's Rest, which is definitely the card that has the most players talking. It's a 8-cost Thank God Voidbound spell, or we would see a lot of combo decks ending the game with this. On its base, it's a Time Walk, take an additional turn after this one. And as Decimate, it's essentially Upheaval, put each unit into its owner's hand. So a little bit the different thing with Decimate is also the higher your maximum power gets, the less of a cost Decimate is. It's very costly to put yourself behind a turn on 3 or 4 power by Decimating and then need to play weaker cards. It slows down your curve. But when you're up at 8 power, it doesn't really matter if you need to Decimate. So it's really easy to look at this as essentially take an additional turn, Upheaval, and the next turn you start with 7 power. And that's pretty good for a lot of decks, and a lot of people are looking forward to using this. I'm not sure where it's going to go. A lot of people want to play this with Temporal Distortion, which sounds pretty strong. We'll have to see where it is going forward. I think this is more of an exciting card than an actual good one, but we'll see how it pans out. And finally, we have the promo, which is Vero, Banished Inquisitor. It is a 3-cost 3/3 that summons to give one of your other paladins Berserk. Yep, it's a paladin tribal plant, and when you Decimate your power, Vero goes Berserk, which is not all that exciting on a 3/3. As a bonus, this works really well with any of the 2-drops that are already in the paladin deck. Hojin hits for 8. Crownwatch Paladin Warcries twice, or Anointer of the Bond makes him a 4/4, which actually means that Berserking him does something, as a 3/3 is not very good. And your bonus effect is that he costs 3, and your other options at 3 in the Paladin deck are not very good. Paladin's still even for now, but we'll see how it goes.